Welcome back. Fewer industries were hit as hard as airlines when the global pandemic locked hundreds of millions of people at home. So how are they doing on the road to recovery? Well, here's a look by the numbers. Canadians are definitely flying again. 62.7 million passengers flew last year, almost triple 2021 levels, but still about 73% of pre-pandemic numbers back in 2019. In December alone, 6.1 million Canadians flew on a major airline. That's 85.1% of December 2019 levels. Passenger counts rose steadily all year from a low of 37.9 in January 2022 to 83.8 by July. That all helped operating revenue at airlines rise. By December, it was $2.3 billion, hitting pre-pandemic levels for the first time. Though on a full-year basis, revenue at major airlines are still 83% of pre-pandemic levels. Some of that drop is simply fewer planes to fly. Air Canada says it will only return to pre-pandemic capacity sometime next year. Meanwhile, costs are rising. Labor and fuel costs mean a 13 to 15% jump in overall costs this year for Air Canada. That's compared to 2019. One thing that's abundantly clear to travelers is that normal feels a long way off for air travel. Costly fares, missing luggage, delays and cancellations. It feels a bit like the turbulence is lasting longer than most of us expected. So when might it end? Jeff Morrison is President and CEO of the National Airlines Council of Canada. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with the capacity issue because it's the last thing most travelers would think about or should have to. And yet it actually is the thing that's most likely to affect availability of flights, the cost of those flights, and then the delays that we encounter when any bad weather happens. How are the airlines doing on restoring the capacity that they took out of the system?
So first of all, you're absolutely correct. Capacity is so vital. It's frankly why we saw a number of disruptions across the aviation ecosystem that we saw last summer as airlines and the various entities within the system were ramping up to meet that capacity challenges. As of today, early 2023, we're seeing capacity, at least at airlines, at pretty much at or near what it was prior to the pandemic. And as you correctly pointed out in your introduction, that's matching where passenger volumes are at, which is also now very close to where it was pre-pandemic. So in short, although of course airlines are not entirely, don't control the entire air travel system, there are a number of other entities, but at least from the airline's perspective, capacity is back to where it was prior to the pandemic.
Of course, one issue about capacity that is also hard for the airlines to control is staffing. And labor has been, and we know from them firsthand, a really big issue. You might have the planes, but not the pilots. Getting the right staff for the various points through the travel system have been very difficult. How are we doing on that front, and what needs to happen to get that back to where it was?
Yeah, so at least from our member airlines, their staffing levels, staffing capacity is very much very close to what it was prior to the pandemic. So they've been overall fairly successful at bringing back staff or bringing on new staff into the system. Again, can't speak for all the other entities that are very much a part of the overall system. But there's no question that especially as we look out into the medium and longer term, labor supply is a critical issue, again, for all of the entities in the system. In fact, just about 2 weeks ago, a parliamentary committee released a report on labor shortages in the transportation sector with a heavy focus on aviation. And there were a number of recommendations that were in that report. And we hope that the government in the forthcoming federal budget and beyond will really look at a number of measures to increase that supply because it's absolutely critical to ensure a long-term sustainable aviation sector. Well,
one thing the government is doing, of course, is increasing the fines and taking them seriously. Critics will still say, Jeff, they're not enough. That the fines and the rebukes that airlines get in terms of passenger rights don't go far enough to really change behavior. It's been a dark period in terms of the relationship with customers because a lot has gone wrong for customers on some Canadian airlines. How do you think that rights it? And do you think the government's playing the right role in trying to help with the backlog of complaints and issuing fines?
Yeah, there's a whole lot that can be said on this issue. One thing I'll point out for starters is that a lot of the claims backlog that we're facing at the CTA that's been the subject of a lot of a discussion really dates back to the summer ramp-up period when, again, airlines and all the various actors in the aviation system were having to ramp up to meet about a 300% increase in air travel demand. So there were challenges across the entire system last summer, and a lot of those complaints are still essentially on the books at the CTA. So there's sort of a backlog, not just in complaints, but of the causes for them. I think, of course, there's been a lot of talk about changing the air passenger protection rights, the APPRs, that the minister has referred to. What we've been saying is, look, if you want to ensure the best passenger experience, let's put in place the policies and the investments necessary to have a much better travel experience overall so that you don't have disruptions in the first place, or disruptions are at least minimized. So again, that's with the federal budget coming up in 2 weeks. We're looking for such investments as, for example, airport infrastructure, because our airports are in desperate need of updated infrastructure. So if we can do those kinds of things, then we can actually minimize passenger disruption in the first place.
Jeff, great to have you with us for this. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Jeff Morrison, President and CEO of the National Airlines Council of Canada. Well, it seems clear that capacity issues or fewer planes in the air makes it hard for airlines to meet demand. That's a reality that was front and center for Flair Airlines this week. It saw 4 of its planes seized by the leasing company that accused it of being in arrears on payments. Flair has launched a $50 million lawsuit in reply, but meantime, customers are left wondering about the future disruption for this airline. Stephen Jones is the CEO for Flair. We talked earlier, and I asked him if travelers can rely on the airline.
Flair is here to stay. Our schedule is fully operating. It has been since Sunday, and we're selling happily into the summer.
The routes that you have right now, planned routes, need more capacity than you have. You need more planes than you've got. Do you have a plan to add planes so that you can satisfy the demand you might see?
Yeah, so we're just going through that process now. Obviously, this was a very unexpected, unwarranted act, and we're now having to fit our capacity that we have available to the schedule that we've got on sale into the summer. It's likely that we'll need to trim some routes so that we can match the two.
Will that mean for some flyers that what the ticket they have in hand will change? In other words, will there be some adjustments that have to be made to existing flights?
There may be some adjustments as we reaccommodate and consolidate some flights, but that's really quite a long way out in the distance, and those flights have very few people booked on them at the moment.
This obviously became a public dispute with the leasing company. You've now launched a lawsuit, Stephen. That's a pretty high-profile step to take. Why is that, this $50 million lawsuit, why is that the right thing to do?
It's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. We think this was an improper seizures for improper purposes, and we have to defend ourselves and defend our ability to provide affordable air travel to all Canadians. I mean, let's think about what Flair has actually done here. We have come in and provided low-cost, low-fare travel to Canadians, something they've been denied for decades. And it's no secret that that's threatening to other players. And so we're here to make sure that we can continue to deliver on that promise and continue to deliver fair fares for everyone.
And when the response is you were in default of lease payments and therefore it's completely appropriate that the planes be taken back, what's the answer to that?
The answer is that it was a very small default for a very small number of days, and this was an unprecedented and I would say precipitous action by the lessor. We had offered to have them completely settled up by the Monday. In the dark of night on Saturday, they came in with people at times illegally coming onto our aircraft and seizing them right in one of the peak holiday weekends of the year. So I think you can join the dots for yourself.
Well, help me out. What is in the interest of the leasing company to do it in that fashion? Why the drama? Why the late night? Why the lack of warning?
Look, I think you have to ask them, but it would be unusual for them to come and seize aircraft if they didn't have somewhere else to put those aircraft.
That is obviously an allegation you've made that they've already sold these aircraft. Is that typical that they would have had to find a home for them before it's hard to actually take possession of 4 aircraft. They probably wanted them to go somewhere. Is that normal that they would have sold them before they seized them?
Look, what's typical is that this would be done in a much more sort of phased and collaborative way. It's not normal to have them come in the middle of the night on a holiday weekend and seize them at times using inappropriate airport identification. And so that's what's unusual. If they really wanted to terminate the leases, we could have talked about that and made it a lot more smooth. In this case, they've come in, they've upset our customers. We're there to try and patched that up. We've backfilled all of our schedule. We've been working with all of the customers that were disrupted on the Saturday. And so, we're just trying to do what's right here.
And we know that costs are high for everybody flying these days, Stephen, across the board, labor, fuel, you name it. Are you feeling good about Flair's future? Again, to reassure travelers, potential customers, what are your prospects here?
I think they're really good. I think that everyone loves a low fare and everyone loves to travel. And that's our model. We keep it simple, provide a simple service at a great price. And we think that, in particular in these times where affordability is the topic, inflation's running high. We've got costs, as you say, and everyone's budgets are tighter. It's a great time to go traveling on a value carrier.
That was Stephen Jones, President and CEO of Flair Airlines. Coming up, the pandemic left a permanent mark on the Canadian economy. We'll take a closer look at that economic hole. But first, even the most loyal of Canadian Tire customers might be tested by the retailer's plan for its loyalty program. Its Triangle Rewards will now offer an $89 subscription level, where in exchange for an annual fee, users get even better rewards worth more than, well, $89, we hope. And they'll earn even more Canadian Tire dollars. Maybe they can use those dollars to buy more drawer space for all that Canadian Tire money. We're back after this.